Hello and welcome to Bright Wings, children's books to make the heart soar. I am your host, Charity Hill. The purpose of this conversation is to help mothers and fathers identify books that will liberate their children to embrace truth, goodness, and beauty.
It is my great joy to have with me today Sam Smith, known to many as SD Smith, the author of the highly beloved Green Ember series. Welcome to Bright Wings, Sam.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting my dull feet onto Bright Wings here. It's a pleasure to be here.
The Green Ember series has sold 500,000 copies since 2015. It's about rabbits with swords who fight wolves and birds of prey to recover their kingdom, a kingdom of beauty, art, learning, farming, and freedom. There's heartbreak in it, betrayal, danger, hope, fidelity, and courage. Some reviewer that I read tried to compare your series, Sam, to Redwall, but you don't find children and adults finding life inspiration in Redwall. And what do I mean by life inspiration? There's the oath, my place beside you, my blood for yours, till the green ember rises, or the end of the world. And the exhortation, bear the flame, and the consoling words, it shall not be so in the mended wood. Everyone who's read you, these words resonate in them. Did you mean to do this?
Yes and no. I did not have a conception of what these stories would mean to people. I was not prepared for that. Because it was a very organic, it was not a calculated sort of experience. Because these were stories that I told my kids. That was a verbal thing. That was on walks, bedtimes, porches, just times where we were together. That when the story became a novel at their request, I thought of it as an artifact for that period, an iteration, yes, but sort of an artifact for that time, from that time that we spent together, and like a keepsake, for our family, an heirloom almost. And we did decide to share it, and we made an effort to share it with more people. But my expectations were pretty modest. In fact, I was pretty convinced when I did start thinking about, now we have to market, what is that? How do I do that? And how do we share this with other people? I was pretty convinced that we had done something I'd written the book that no one would read because there were rabbits. So I was like, they're little bunnies, older kids are not going to read it. But then, like you're saying, like you hinted at, it's a little more serious. There's this sort of epic quality to it. So I was like, little kids are not going to like this. So I was like, nobody is going to like this. That was sort of my fear. But that turned out to be the opposite of what really happened. What really happened was quite a wide range of ages enjoy it and are engaged in it, partly because I think it does have those two levels. It has that sort of depth that parents, what we've really experienced, and I'm going to try to share this with the modesty that I kind of feel. I feel like this is a modest calling in a hospitable job, sort of rooted in, it's like a service industry job. I feel like I don't feel superior to the person who serves, barbecue or hamburgers. I feel like that's what I'm doing, but it's soul food, but I'm still a servant and I'm still serving. But I will say that what we've experienced, what we've heard back from people is that often kids are leaping for joy and moms are weeping for joy when they read the stories, and that the kids are like, oh wow, cool action, like that they won, or the fight, that they're resonating with that, and moms are weeping at the things you're describing, that sort of hope for amending and the sort of moral imagination component. So I think both of those things are going on, and it sort of works on those two levels. And was I clever enough to sort of contrive that? No, I wasn't. That was a gift that came and happened, and I feel really grateful for that gift, and I'm grateful for the effect, for the impact that the stories have had on families that I really love and really care about and have a deep, deep desire to serve.
I would love to talk more about the Green Ember series with you. That's actually been a dream of mine for a couple of years now, but
let's do it.
Because you've given so much, you've given us so much to think about, but you've got some big news, and I'd love you to be able to share this huge news. So out with it.
Yes, I have become a full-time rabbit wrangler. I'm retiring from storytelling, and I'm just train rabbits now to fight with swords, and I'm raising an army. They're a small army, yes, People say me and the mouse in my pocket, but now it's me and the army of rabbits in my backyard. And so thank you. This is an exclusive. This is a Bright Wings exclusive. If I could get some bright wings for these rabbits, that would even help. That would be
wings.
It was some Island of Dr. Moreau sort of stuff there. But no, what I think what you're talking about is the new book, the new series. So I wrote the Green Ember for my kids, and I looked down the hall of my house and found my co-writer for my next series. I'm writing my next series with my son, my 16-year-old son, Josiah, or J.C. Smith. We are writing a book that is coming out very soon called Jack Zulu and the Waylander's Key.
That is big news.
Let me ask, did you or your son, Josiah, first think of this story?
He started. So it's kind of cool. Josiah's a really creative kid. He loves story. And so I think he was about 13 years old, and he started working on a treatment for a TV show. He loves the visual arts. He sort of writes very cinematically. So he was writing a treatment for a show. I approached him at some point and just said, hey, when we're talking to movie studios or movie people or TV people about the Green Ember, it's a lot different for us to say, hey, we have a book series that's, sold over 1 million copies. We have an established audience that's pretty eager, that kind of thing. Like let's talk about this or whatever. That's a different conversation than, hey, I've got an idea for a rabbit story. So I was telling him, I said, maybe you should consider novelizing it and novelizing the show idea. And that might give you a little more grounding when you're talking about making the show. And it might just help to sort of basically establish the IP, establish the intellectual property. That would help you be more effective in the show, and you might enjoy the process too. And I said, you can always iterate, as you do with a show or a movie. And I said, you can do it. I can help you just do it yourself because you're a pretty good writer, or we can do it together. Totally left it up to him. It was his option, and he was really excited about that. And so we started this journey together. So definitely his idea to begin with. And it's really been a cool collaboration, a real, contrast. And we have different strengths. We bring different strengths to the table, but it's been honestly, very much enjoyed working with him as a co-writer. He's a great son, and he's an awesome co-writer.
That is great. I'm glad you like each other.
We do. But I can send him to his room at any time, so that might help. Everything's about power dynamics now, so I guess that's...
Which character did he think of first? Did he tell you? Who did he invent first? Or
I think Jack and Benny were the originals. So okay. I don't remember maybe what they were. I think he was always Jack. Maybe it was always Jack and Benny. So he had a vision for Jack and Benny. And I think what I brought is a lot of, the main character, he's a young kid. His name's Jack Zulu. Zulu is a very common last name in South Africa, where I used to live as a kid. But I've spent most of my life in West Virginia and lived in West Virginia until I was 12 years old, and lived in South Africa during my teenage years. So I brought a lot of the sort of like Jack's heritage is his mom's from West Virginia and his dad's from South Africa. His dad's Zulu. And so that's, I brought a lot of that because I've always loved that mix. I've always loved that sort of what I call an Afro-Latchin. Like my background is very Afro-Latchin. I'm Appalachian, African mix kind of, and I've loved both. I mean, if I'm looking over my office right now and I see the state seal of West Virginia mounted on my wall of my little office here, the Forge, right beside of a Zulu shield. Like it's very much in my heart and in my life. So this was a very natural thing. So I kind of brought a lot of that to the table. But I think it was probably Jack and Benny. There was always that sort of those two, the contrast of those two and their relationship, I think, was at the heart of the sort of the genesis of the story.
As I read Jack Zulu, several things come to mind, and these are always my perennial questions. And I think the great problem of the book is Jack's question, which I feel like is like 4 questions all rolled into one. The questions, who am I? Where am I from? Where am I going? What good must I do? Or another way of saying that is, what kind of person do I want to become? Do you think that's an all right way of describing the main problem of Jack Zulu?
Yes, it is. It is definitely about Jack and his sort of internal. We're always seeing the whole story is from his point of view. So he's the point of view character. He's not. The narration isn't, and then I did this, then I did that. It is he did this, he did that. But it's still sort of deep inside of Jack and what he's seeing. It's limited. point of view. So you're sort of saying, I think that's actually a gift. I think it's cool. We see what Jack sees, basically.
Yeah.
And what he is, that's exactly what's happening with him. And he's being offered, I think of it as Jack's got two paths in front of him. And they're complicated. There's different sort of things, but he's basically got two examples of what he can do. And I think of them as sort of the way of life and the way of death, that there's the grasping, envy, escape, ingratitude, greatness at any cost sort of path. And then there's sort of the path of service, the path of sacrifice, the path of gratitude, the path of just sort of being awake to the wonder around him. And so I think that's sort of,
yeah.
to me,
and yet it's still greatness.
Yes.
The other choice is, it's really a choice between two different kinds of greatness is what I noticed.
Yeah. One's greatness without goodness, and one's greatness with great goodness.
Yeah. This first question, who am I? I just want to dig a little into, why is Jack half African and half Appalachian? You spoke about the fact that it's these two aspects of your own life, your two aspects of something that you are and something that you love. Why is he from such different cultures or worlds? But I realize you are also used to juxtaposing very unlike things: rabbits, swords.
Yeah, I like it because it basically, at the beginning of the story, even before Jack encounters sort of this, what would be considered a fantasy world, he has a moment where he finds a gate and he goes into a city between worlds. It's the classic sort of escape from the ordinary world into something like a Narnia or fairyland, something like that. He experiences that. But even before that, he's already divided a little bit. Mm-hmm. He's already invited to be divided by and it helps him to feel unsettled in some ways. And again, he can look at that as this is a cross, this is a challenge, this is a curse. He can look at that kind of a thing. And I think we're all sort of like, we're all made up, we're all complicated people, I think, and we can all see those sort of complications or challenges or what look like curses to us. We can sort of receive them as things that divide us, from other people. It also divide us from ourselves, sort of, that we feel like an endless sort of conflict. And I think, Jack, so the point is, well, one reason is just because I totally dig that, because that's true of my life. Like, I love I love Africa, and I love the Zulu tribe and culture, and also love Appalachian culture. So I was just like, I just wanted to explore that. And I like, so I love Zulu people, so I just sort of want them to be sort of seen in our in kids' literature. And the same with West Virginia. Like, West Virginia is kind of an overlooked place. He's sort of got a few reasons to feel marginalized, in a place that's overlooked, because dumb hillbillies, nobody cares about sort of poor Appalachian, small town, rural kind of people. That's how it feels, outsiders. So, you got to get out of here to become anything. And then he's also got the complication of, he's in that culture, and he's also not exactly like anybody else there. So he's sort of even an alien he's almost like a marginalized person in a marginalized community, not to use like popular sort of words, but that's true about him. He feels that way. So he's got reasons to indulge sort of self-pity or ingratitude that are reasonable. But that's part of like that. So that's the beginning of his journey. He's already conflicted. He's already a kind of a boy between worlds before he becomes literally a boy between worlds.
Yeah. And at the same time, still, like, even though he feels like a bit of an outsider in a place that's an outsider location, Appalachia, he's still, as the book opens, he's still kind of a hero, like on the baseball field. And so people expect great things of him, nevertheless.
Yeah, he is. So there's a little bit of the sort of superhero aspect to him. He is gifted, and that's another thing. He does have ordinary gifts. Like, he is unusual, but he's not enhanced in any kind of special way, like a Superman or something. So but he is gifted. He's very gifted. So you have this sort of like, I'm gifted, I'm here. What do you do with that gifting? And his, I think, wrong approach is, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here and go be great somewhere. And that's not always the worst thing in the world, but his sort of lesson lies in that. So he's actually more challenged because he is great. Yeah. And like, the question is, again, will he become good? Will he be good along with great?
I don't know whether I want to talk about Benny next, or the move on to the question, where am I from? Benny he's kind of Jack's foil in a certain sense. He continues to show how great Jack is, but he seems to do this without resentment. And he also kind of pokes holes in Jack in ways that are friendly and truthful.
Yeah, I love Benny. I think he's a wonderful character. He's really, and if you like the old Mayberry, the Andy Griffith show, he's sort of like the Don Knotts character, the Barney Fife sort of, like you said, he's kind of the foil. He's Jack is in some ways the straight man. I think Jack does become is more complicated than that. He's not boring.
Yeah.
Jack is interesting and the story is about him. But Benny is exactly like you said. He sort of shows a contrast. But again, Benny's story's not over. Benny's starting somewhere too, and he's got a journey to make. Yeah, he's less physically gifted, certainly, but he has something to offer, and a lot of times it's humor. You know, he is funny, he's loyal, so he has a lot of great qualities. But I think one of my favorite things about him is I think he makes you laugh like throughout the book. He's fun to be around.
He's so good that it gives him wisdom too in different parts of the book. He's just so good and true to Jack. He's a lot stronger than you think he is. At different points, I was like, oh no, what is going to happen in the course of this book to this good friendship? But you don't. You do good things, and you don't. I'm trying not to give anything away.
Yeah, I'm trying not to give
of course.
anything away even beyond this book. So I'm
looking forward to more, Benny.
Benny survives. We'll say that. So he's still there. Big spoiler.
You're really good, Sam. Should I call you Mr. Smith? I'm partway into this.
I don't think so. No,
Sam. Okay,
that's my name, Mrs. Hill. Please call me Sam.
You're very good at creating a sense of place. So this idea of where he's from, he's so very gifted, and he's not sure that he can keep on being himself in this small town. And a lot of us think we have to go somewhere else. I think we have to leave where we're from to become who we are.
Yeah, that's a really.
And Jack's from a small town in West Virginia, right, called Myrtle.
Yeah,
and you've made it a specific place. You've filled it with a pizzeria, a school, a ball field, and the characters frequent these places, right? Which causes us to experience familiarity with them too. We almost know what the town looks like. We can almost imagine riding our bikes around. We get hungry for pizza almost as often as Benny does.
That's the coolest thing. My son will be delighted to hear that you say that, because that's certainly what we want to happen. It's sort of the romance of the ordinary. It's a little bit, if people are familiar with sort of the writing or even just some popular quotations of G.K. Chesterton, I think of this as sort of a Chestertonian rural fantasy. That there's the romance of the ordinary. Part of the heart of the book is this quotation by G.K. Chesterton, where it's in Orthodoxy, but he says, I'm going to paraphrase it, but basically in fairyland. In fairy, the apples are golden so that we can remember in the real world that they're green. And the rivers run with wine in fairy so that we can remember in the real world that they run with water. And the point is, one is no less miraculous than the other. It's a miracle that we can pick and eat apples off of a tree. So we already live in a fantasy world. And that's part of what happens, is that we didn't want it to create not to pick on Thomas Kincaid, but we don't want to create a painting of a place that's not real, that doesn't have any problems. We didn't want to do that. There are problems in Myrtle, and you can see that. And there are certainly problems in rural West Virginia today. I know. I live there. I'm part of it. I'm part of the problem. But there's beauty too, and there's goodness, and that's definitely part of the. So I'm so glad to hear that the place feels real. The place feels real, and that there's goodness there, because that's certainly at the heart of the book.
I have a problem though. Why the 1980s, mate? Why does it? Why did you stage it in the 80s?
Because I'm so old. That's why. It's funny that it's basically my childhood. Like Jack's around what my age would have been. So that and there are some cool story limitations that come with the 80s. You know,
yeah.
The kids on bikes without cell phones is kind of a compelling story. And so it was a natural setting there. People understand it generally. And I just love it. Josiah and I both love stories set sort of in there, like literally created then, like stories like The Karate Kid or those kinds of things, or Star Wars. We love those kinds of stories. And just to go back to your other point, like when you talk about like Jack feels like he has to leave rural West Virginia in order to become actualized sort of as a person or whatever the lingo would be. That's not a fantasy. That's like where I live right now.
99% of us think that.
Well, I mean, it's funny that it's true in West Virginia. Like, people with talent leave for opportunity. They go to Charlotte. They go somewhere else. They go to they go to cities, big cities. We don't have any big cities in West Virginia. They go other places for opportunity. And the feeling is, I cannot be who I am meant to be. I cannot do what I need to do here. And for some people, I think that's true. And there's sort of a sad reality to some of that. But there's also a compounding effect of that sort of compounds the kinds of poverty that we experience often in Appalachia in general, and West Virginia particularly, I think. So I want to not scold people for that necessarily. That's not really my heart. I totally understand people. You got to make decisions about what you do with your family. I get that. My family moved to Africa. There was a reason for that. And there was a reason why we came back, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not dissing or disrespecting anybody that makes those choices. But I think coded in a organic way in this story is an invitation to be where you are, and to see yourself as part of a community, and to see yourself as what would it be like if I chose to be here? If I chose to be here to show up as a part of this community. I certainly hope more and more people do that. More and more people with talent and ability and opportunity stay in West Virginia. That's been my choice and my story, and I want people to do that. And I want people to move here. That would be wonderful, and see themselves as part of what's happening here, because there's value here that's not always measured the same way it is in every place. But in some senses, we're very rich here. We're very rich with natural beauty and opportunity in that sense. So we're rich in different ways, and there's different gifts. And I it's not just about West Virginia. I really would love to invite people to love their place, wherever that is. Root for your team. Don't root for my team. It's fine if you're a Texas Longhorn fan, as painful as that is for me, you go for it. Enjoy it. But I'm going to keep rooting for the Mountaineers, despite how often they lose. I'm going to keep getting my heart broken. But I do. Awesome. The invitation to love where you are, and to see the magic of your place, and to recognize that you already live in a fantasy world.
Yeah,
that is a gift.
Well, I want to talk about the next question, which is, where am I going? The question of, where is Jack going? He thinks he has to leave. He's kind of, you said he's kind of has this interior split. Jack seems to be faced with a choice about what he admires, about what he loves. And that's what drives his action. Do you think that's a fair interpretation?
Yeah, I think that's true about Jack. And I think it's true about a lot of us, that whole sort of, you become what you behold. You become what you love, all that sort of thing. And I think he, like we talked about earlier, I feel like Jack has given a pretty clear vision between one man and another man, of sort of like two different options that he could go. And I feel like that's sort of like the Garden of Eden. It's just ever since, has God really said, like, if you would do this, if you could just make this modification, this kind of a thing, you would really be your true self. If you could really express yourself fully, you could transform. And I feel like we hear these messages all the time. Sometimes they're very, rooted in actual sort of like physical transformation or something like that. But often it's just like it can be an emotional sort of thing, whatever. We believe if we could just get that fruit, we would be, we could change, we could become something that we're not. And there's this sort of like there's two sides of the coin, I guess. There's this holy ambition of like, I want to become, a saint. I want to become someone who follows. For me, I want to follow Jesus Christ with my whole heart. I want to be transformed by him. And Lewis talks so much beautifully about how, like, and this is the difference between sort of the way of life and the way of death. The way of life, you lay down your life and you die to yourself. And that is the way of becoming the most like yourself you could possibly ever become.
Like the grain of wheat, unless it dies, it does not grow. It doesn't become a new thing, entirely new creation.
Absolutely. That's so true. And I feel like that the one who knows us, the one who made us, who knows us better than any of us know ourselves. There is this sort of like, there are religions of the world that are like, dissolve into light, and everybody sort of becomes a part of the global energy or whatever. You sort of like, you lose nirvana, you become sort of less of yourself. You lose yourself in this sort of collective consciousness. And that's not the Christian view at all. The Christian view of all is you do die to yourself. And that's the way that you become alive, but you are an individual. There'll never be another person like you. And you belong inside of a family, but you have membership. And Lewis talks about that membership, that you're not a person, you're not a number, you have a name and you're loved. And actually this irony of the more you die to yourself, the more you become the best self you could ever become. There's nobody who's more themselves, who know themselves better, who are more clear of themselves, I think, than like the martyrs. Like they know exactly who they are, and they know exactly how they belong, and they have identity and beauty and importance just on. And so I think, that's sort of like you have to lose yourself to find yourself. You have to lose your life to find it. And I think that's part of. I think that's what we're all facing, and certainly Jack is facing that in this very particular way in the story.
So there's a character in Jack Zulu who says, I'm paraphrasing, I couldn't find it in the book. The character says, there are fates worse than death. There are things that to suffer that are worse than suffering death. And this is really a bold proposal. Was it you or was it Josiah who wanted to include this? I wondered. Do you know which one of you thought of this?
I don't know. It's so hard to know where one begins and one ends.
Yeah.
But I think that was Jack's mom, and she's facing, from the very beginning of the book, she's facing death through cancer, through a sickness. And so she is thinking a lot about those kinds of things anyway. And that's really, it's the same thing in the Green Ember books. All those characters are faced with this sort of like invitation to like, well, you could be safer than you are. And you can protect yourself. You could protect yourself and be safer in the short run, but you would kind of lose your soul in the process if you did. Again and again, the characters in the Green Ember give up their own personal safety, and they exhibit when they are actually very afraid. My characters, my good characters are rarely, if ever, fearless. Many of them are very afraid, which reflects my own experience. But they are intensely brave because they go anyway. They do it anyway. They show up. And that's certainly the invitation there, and that's definitely the wisdom of Jack's mom. Doesn't want to die. I don't want to leave you. I don't want to lose my life here right now. But there are things far worse than that. And she's got a sort of an eternity. She's got an eternal perspective, and she's probably the most direct Christian kind of character in the whole book. She's unashamed to describe her devotion to the Lord and her trust, even through pain and difficulty, in what he has in plans, even when it doesn't make sense to her.
It's a bold proposal. I think it's a bold thing to tell children so explicitly that there are things worse than death. So I think it's a good thing to talk about early and to consider early. Our young people think about early.
Well, I totally agree with you because the reality is our kids will face that. So I'm a big believer in not sort of dumbing down and like patting kids on the head. And I want to be tender. I want to be sensitive. I want to be aware of where kids are age-wise and appropriate and all that. But kids face, again, Chesterton, he just talks about they know about the dragon. They already know. You don't have to tell them about the dragon. They know. What they don't necessarily know about is St. George, and they need to hear about St. George. They need to hear about who beats the dragon, who defeats the dragon, because they're already aware there's something wrong. And if they're not, they will be very quickly, because they'll have a death. There'll be a death scene, a friend, a parent, a grandparent. It happens, and it's coming for them, and it's coming. They will experience it. So I understand preserving, protecting. We got to do the best we can, but I'm with you that having those conversations earlier. If you lose me as a parent who loves you and who will give their life for you in many, many ways, it will hurt. It'll be bad in many ways, but that is not the worst thing. And I think you're exactly right that we need to give kids a gift. And that's part of what I want to do with fiction is I want to tell them the truth. I want to tell them the truth about the world in a way that's honest and faithful, so that it gives them the strength to endure. Because my experiences, I hear so often from families that are going through childhood cancer or something like that, kids that are going through really, really difficult times. And the Green Ember really resonates with those kids. And that it makes me very, very happy.
Wow.
To have the gift of being able to serve those kids and those families. That's been an unbelievable, unexpected grace. in my life, but that makes me more passionate to lean in and be serious and take these things seriously, and to sort of give those kids those rungs to grab onto, because it's coming. It's I write dangerous stories for dangerous kids. Like the world is already dangerous. It's already difficult. It's already challenging. And I want the kids to feel armed and to feel like they can grow and they can, because the darkness is there. And I want them to be ready with the light.
Speaking of being dangerous, there's a passage on page 56 in which Jack and Benny and Mr. Wheeler are having a conversation, and they've just had an encounter with a monster. Benny's so great. He says, "Should we call the cops or get some grub?" He's always hungry. "Mamma mia, I don't know what's going on. Help me." And then Mr. Wheeler says, "I'm sorry, Benny. I never intended for you to be involved. I'd hoped not even to involve Jack at this time." "Involve us in what?" Jack asked. "In my troubles," Mr. Wheeler said, "in an old war that seems suddenly and very sadly indeed unwon." And then Jack says something that's really stood out to me. He says, "We're in a war?" Jack asked. Something inside him sparked to life at this prospect. And Mr. Wheeler wants to back out of this. He says, "You, Jack Zulu, you're not tied up in this adventure. You have troubles of your own." What I wanted to ask you is, why does something in Jack come to life at the prospect of war?
I mean, I think it's.
I wonder also if it's tied to the fact that he's a boy.
Certainly. I think he's a good young man. And I think he's been a lot through his mom and a lot through stories of his dad, and who was a police officer and died valiantly in the line of duty. And the books that Mr. Wheeler gave him for years is that his vision about what a good man is someone who's prepared to face up to evil, to face up to challenges and difficulty. So there was, and I think it's what you described earlier, sort of as like that sort of good greatness that's in him. And he's, I think there's what is he built for? What is he sort of, what moment is he created for? What are his gifts good for? I think that's sort of like a vision for him that sort of turns on a little bit there and lights up, like, and it's when Wheeler says, "No, it's not for you. It's not for you." There's like a, oh, good kind of, but he's not really, it's not convincing that he means it. And I'm glad you picked up on that. I thought I was being pretty subtle, but apparently not. It sounded very, very overt, but yeah, there's a challenge out there, a quest. And I think that it's true that boys need to be tuned into and given the opportunity to see that their gifts are useful in the world. I feel like there's a pretty intense disregard for some masculine virtues and traditionally masculine virtues, and I think boys feel a little bit lost, and it's reflected in every sort of measurement. Boys they commit suicide at a much higher rate. They're failing in school at a much higher rate. They read less. They just succeed a whole lot less, and almost
they're not going to college in record numbers. I think that affects that shows sort of a lack of hope and
totally.
investment in
all
your
those
future and ownership for your life.
Yeah.
So we need the gifts that boys are.
We do. I feel that pretty intensely, and I'm not on a mission to sort of like, that's not my sole mission in life, but that certainly flavors sort of I like the fact. I mean, the Green Ember had male and female sort of heroes, heroines, and I love that. I thought it was cool. It was a real two-hander, and this book's got three main characters, two boys and a girl, and that gets explored more and more as the story goes on. But yeah, I see boys hurting, and I want to love them. I want to give them a gift, and I think this book will click with boys who, like you said, need hope and direction, a vision for what it means to be. And Jack needs that, actually, and he sort of experiences that too. He sort of experiences two versions of what masculinity can be.
Yeah,
and one is a humble, self-sacrificing, strong, gentle man, and one is a rapacious, grasping villain. Who is also compelling, and is masculine, And so there's,
in this very admirable way. Yeah. I mean, he's very, the villain is very attractive, actually. I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
First of all, though, I just want to just state one small critique of the book, Sam, if you don't mind. When I first saw the cover of Jack Zulu, I thought, oh no, this looks very trendy.
Oh, really?
How could it be good? Like, how could it be really satisfying and be so trendy? And I was afraid to open it because I didn't want to be disappointed. So, but then I opened it to the prologue, and you floored me with these words of Rancast, who's a very like Miltonian satanic figure, like from John Milton's Paradise Lost. I haven't read it recently. I'm not that awesome. I haven't read Paradise Lost recently, but there are these kind of almost like soliloquies by Satan in Paradise Lost, where you're very sympathetic. It makes you kind of sympathetic to who he is and his problems. You think maybe he got a bad deal.
Yep.
And I was wondering if this similarity is intentional. What's wrong with wanting to take? Mm-hmm. What's wrong with wanting to be powerful rather than weak? Mm-hmm. Don't we want to, in the words of one of the characters, escape our small existence and gain ever-growing enhancements towards perfection?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that was really important. It's important to Josiah, my co-writer, particularly, that he had to be compelling, because Jack's not stupid. Jack is a very smart kid. He gets good grades. He pays attention. He's sort of an achiever kind of a type. He's not a hopeless person who's just going to glom onto any sort of shiny thing. He's sharp. So our villain has to be as well. And yeah, I mean, it's been a long time since I've read Paradise Lost as well, but that's certainly the hope, is that it is compelling. And I think that's what's so compelling about it's so deceitful about the enemy, is that it's so often it'll be this sort of lie at the heart, surrounded by this vanguard of truths. And that's what you find with Rancast, is this. I think it's what you find with Satan. Satan doesn't invent anything. Satan bends what God intends, I like to say. And I think he's a bender. He's a pervert. He perverts things. He twists things. And there's no original material out there that like, oh, Satan came up with this really cool thing. No, God's got it all: music, love, romance, beauty, art, everything. And everything is perverted by the enemy. And so he's this really admirable, really effective, really strong twister of things. And sometimes he twists very hard, and you're like, oh, I can see that's really bent. And sometimes it's like, oh, did he just make that straighter? And it's very compelling. And so I hope it feels authentic in that sense. And
I appreciate it too, though. Because there is a kind of glamour to evil.
Yes,
it does seem to promise us something.
Yes, Simone Weil says that, right? That and I'll get the quotation wrong, but imaginary evil is always like amazing, glorious, and imaginary good is always boring and simple. But real good is amazing. It's beautiful. I wish I could think of the exact quotation. Imagine, but real evil is always boring and dead. And so there's this sheen of like, hey, did God know when you eat this, you're going to be really wise, and it's going to be, and it's like, yeah,
you're going to be enhanced.
And it's true, but it's like, ooh, he left out some key things. And so yeah, it's definitely attractive, and that's definitely on purpose. It has to feel real, because it feels real to me. The compelling lies of the enemy feel real to me. They feel convincing to me. When I sin, that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, I think that seems right.
I really prefer this. It's going to be good.
That's going to make it better for me. I'm going to be better off. And it's just it's a lie. It's such a lie. But it is seductive. Seductive lies for sure.
There's you mentioned earlier being careful about having tenderness for your readers, depending on where they're at with these representations of good and evil. And I think we do need characters, as many are in the Green Ember, who choose goodness and remain faithful to it through thick and thin, right? They, like Pickett, goes through a difficult time, close to despair in the first book. But he recovers from this, for example, and staying faithful to goodness doesn't mean that something is adramatic. It is still dramatic.
Yes.
But for more mature readers, one thing I know that you're, I'm guessing you're still writing the future books of Jack Zulu. And I just wanted to encourage you to pursue this, to show characters grappling with the glamour of evil, and sometimes failing and suffering the consequences. So often I want to protect my children from the consequences of my failings and their failings. And my husband, he works at a school, and he says that when it comes to disciplinary measures, so many kids want to re-describe their bad actions away.
Yeah.
And they definitely don't want to live through any of the damage that their action may have caused. Mm. Two of some of the most interesting characters in the Green Ember series, Prince Kylan and Helmer, are also the most troubled characters. Yeah. And we really feel at stake in their drama, but they really lead us, I think, because their characters have grappled with evil and suffering within themselves. That's my encouragement to you, Sam. It's dangerous to show children the glamour of evil, but for these older readers,
we dare not do anything less than show them the truth in a responsible way.
To represent the strength of goodness and the deception of evil at the heart of it, of the glamour.
That's such a good word, because I totally agree with you. Sometimes I wonder why people who love the Green Ember, it is amazing for how many of them Helmer is their favorite character. I mean, they love Helmer, and Helmer's so mean and such a jerk. Like at the beginning of the story, you're just like, what? Why do they? But they love him, and I think it's probably what you're talking about. He's complicated. He's interesting because he's got this challenge. He's got this arc, and I think you're right. It's characters who are in pain and people who are tempted, and I hope that will always be the case. I hope that we can sort of faithfully execute what you're describing. That's certainly the intent, is to be as honest and generous and to kind of deal with it. It's hard because what you want to do is just like fix stuff. But that's where all the drama comes. It's where all the conflict comes. It comes with this sort of, and that's really the heart of it. The heart of the whole story is like, there's a vision of the world where I can take a shortcut to greatness. I can get the crown without the cross. And I feel like that's sort of the temptation of characters we love throughout. That's Aragorn's temptation in Lord of the Rings. It's other sort of similar characters' temptation all along the way. And I just think the way of Jesus, the way of life, is this sort of like going to the cross, and then for the glory, for the joy that's set before him. And I think that's sort of the pattern we want, and we want it in every little way. We want it. What's the shortcut? How do I do this without the work? Almost even for writers, it's like, how do I do this without really working very hard? How do I make the right connections? How do I network properly or whatever? And it's like, you actually have to it's really hard, and you have to and it's actually better for you if you take the long cut. And I believe that, and it's certainly better. And even though you're getting at the heart of it. That's what I don't want to do. I don't want to go to the cross. I want to go to the crown, and there is no way to the one without the other. Yeah, and I just feel like that's what we are called to, and so I need to continually be reminded of that, and given that gift of like reality, that dose of reality, that there's a pain, and we see it everywhere. Every person who's like gone on a journey of trying to get healthy, like getting a diagnosis of some kind of challenge, like, oh my goodness, I've got to, if I don't do this, if I don't change, I'm going to die, or this is going to worsen for me. So I've got to like go to the gym, or I've got to like eat that, all those things that sort of wake us up. Like there is no shortcut. We can't say, oh, I'll take the pill and it'll work. And we do have wonderful things in medicine and things, but the reality is you gotta work for stuff. You gotta
live through it. You gotta live through it. You just so many things that are valuable have to be lived through.
Yes.
Yeah.
They involve pain. Childbirth is like this. It's the thing I always come back to with writers is like, if you want to give birth to a great story, there will be pain involved. And I don't know of anybody who's done that and just like, oh, it was super easy. And I could tell you about the Green Ember, my story of releasing the Green Ember, of sharing that. We had a version of it I told you earlier, but there's more. There's more, and that is unbelievable pain and challenges and really, really, really difficult times. Like unbelievable. I cannot believe that the Green Ember ever happened. And so it came through this painful period. And I just think that's often the case. I just feel like that's often the case. And we've got to be, that's why we need the virtues. That's why we need to be courageous and brave. It's why I don't like hearing stuff like, oh, he was fearless. Really? Like well, that's not interesting to me. A fearless person is not interesting. A fearful, anxious person who does it and shows up anyway and works, person who's in pain. I don't like effortless. I understand when people say, oh, that looks effortless. That is kind of cool. That's kind of a glorious thing when a professional athlete or something is like makes something incredibly difficult and look effortless. That's beautiful. That's because if we could see their whole life, we would watch them in the gym and we would see those muscles forming, and we would see them get discouraged, and we would see them show up early and take 10,000 shots or get on the beam or whatever. If we could see the pain, we would appreciate it even more. We would know that's not effortless. That was given birth to from intense labor. So it's all, like you said, the grain of wheat dying, all that stuff. It's all over creation.
This has been an amazing conversation. Okay, last question, Sam.
So we spoke about Helmer a little bit more here. And we've spoken about both series, Sam, and I've been really glad to be able to talk about the Green Amber series, even as you're moving into this new thing with Jack Zulu.
A good friend of mine and a passionate fan of yours wanted to know.
She was like, you have to ask him if he's ever considered a Helmer backstory. Have you?
Yes. I get asked that probably more than any other character. Like, would you go back and tell a story? But it's always the Helmer backstory. And definitely, yes, I have, for sure. I sort of know it, myself to some degree. Yeah, I'm totally open to that. It would maybe fit into sort of a whole world of the golden age, the previous golden age, when King Jupiter was reigning, and sort of the rise of Helmer and Lord Hewson and Wilfred and all these kind of guys. So I've thought about it. Sure.
Cool. That's cool. Tell us the final details for Jack Zulu. So
when and where can we get a copy?
So you can pre-order it. You can pre-order it on October 4th at sdsmith.com or jackzulu.com. It'll be pretty easy to find. If you don't know about my work and you want to just sort of test it out, I think you said you listened to maybe the audiobook to begin with, but you can get the audiobook for free by going to sdsmith.com/updates. And that's a good place to sort of, find out when things are released. But Jack Zulu will be out very soon. I'm super excited. I hope that the folks will give it a chance and they'll dive into it. It helps us an awful lot if people will take that risk and try it out. And you're one of the first people I've talked to who's read it. So it sounds like it wasn't as trendy as you thought, which is funny because I don't know what's trendy. You said it looked trendy. I was like, I don't know what that means because I don't know what we were just had a vision for what it should look like, but I don't. So anyway, it's not trendy, even if it looks trendy. Watch out. Okay.
It's just good. This has been a dream come true to have this conversation with you, Sam. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure. It's been wonderful to be on the Bright Wings. I've enjoyed the flight.